Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this, our last webinar of the series. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us up until the end. As usual, if you have any questions, please write them on the chat. And this webinar will be recorded and uploaded on Facebook if you want to show it to somebody else later on. This today is probably the most interesting topic of digital dentures. Many people struggle with understanding why digital dentures make sense in a practice, in a laboratory, in a DSO, and why is it that it can help you improve the services that you provide, and how is it that you can make more money. I'm going to start explaining a little bit of these. It's a complicated lecture. Please bear with me. Might get tongue-tied here and there. It's complicated calculations. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. So without further ado, let's begin. So many people ask me, why do digital dentures with the Dentca design system make sense economically? And it's a very valid question. A lot of people tell me, well, why should I switch? How is this going to help me? And there seems to be a lot of confusion. But before I jump into that, I want to explain a little bit about the situation that we're currently living in the US, so you can understand a little bit more on why switching to digital makes a lot of sense as a whole. And then I'm going to talk about how profitable it is. But bottom line is, dentures haven't really changed much in about 100 years, except for the last 6 years where we came out with new ways of making dentures. But besides that, materials have evolved, but the way we made dentures up until that point has been the same. And one of the biggest challenges of this is how long it takes to actually make these dentures, and how hard is it to actually make a profit out of them. And this is probably one of the main reasons why many dentists just try to stay away from dentures altogether. So we have incorporated, we have a lot of the ancient or oldest techniques that were used in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s, and up until today. And we're making it more accurate and more functional. And one of the things that we have noticed, and this is a study back from about 2012, where the American College of Prosthodontics expected or said there are over 36 million fully edentulous individuals, meaning at least one of the arches was fully edentulous. And they were expecting these numbers to grow over 200 million in the next 2 decades. Now we're 1 decade in, so our current estimates is within about 100 to 120 million edentulous people in the US. Not only that, but 90% of those people that are edentulous either need new dentures, or 15% gets new dentures made every year because they're not happy with them. Meaning that from that 100 to 120 million, 90% is out there for the taking. It means patients that actually need service for their dentures. And then on the other side, for those who are not familiar with this, back in 2006, there were about 12,250 dental laboratories, and that number has seriously dwindled up until today. Today, we have about 6,000 laboratories currently operating in the US. This is because either they just didn't make it through the difficult economy, and I'm sure after COVID, these numbers are further dwindled down, or they were acquired by bigger labs, you know, or they merge with different companies to try to create stronger services. But there's the fact that there's less labs out there to provide a service is certainly solid. And the other thing that we see on these labs is, even though there's fewer labs that remain, it's not like all the employees that were on the other labs just moved out there. The number of employees per laboratory are also dwindling and going below what you would expect. There were about almost 50,000 employed dental technicians back in 2001. And about today, we have about 37,000. So we've also lost a lot of the employees that knew how to make these dentures. And the bottom line, or what I'm trying to get to all of this, is that denture making is a time-consuming process that requires several steps. It requires a lot of attention to detail, and it requires special skills from dental technicians. Nowadays, most dental technicians want to focus on crown and bridge because it's more profitable for them. So there's very few dental technicians out there that actually know how to properly make a denture. And if you do find one, you have to pay them a lot of money to actually be employed by you. So there's a bigger demand than for dentures out there. There's a lot of patients that need dentures, but there's very few people that can provide them. So both on the laboratory end and on the dental end, this makes a lot of sense. It's a really good point to jump in and try to make your processes faster so you can see more patients or so you can serve more dentists. And on top of that, you also want processes that have faster turnaround time. They're easier to do as far as impressions and manufacture, and also where you can retrieve easily a copy of the denture that you created so you don't lose time over there. So as we move forward, demand is going to steadily increase, but supply is becoming very limited. So this is where it makes a lot of sense to jump in right now, where you can still capture a lot of clientele out there. And the most important reason why this is happening is time. As you all know, we've heard this before, very famous phrase, time is money. So of course, reducing the time it takes you to make a denture, reducing your appointment times so you can see more clients, it gives you the opportunity to make more money. And I'm going to go into a lot of detail on why that is. But using digital dentures does not only improve the quality of time, as the quality of what we do as far as time goes, but it also improves the quality of life for patients. I looked at a study that was really interesting where it said that the length of stay in nursing homes for people who just started to join it is usually for about 6 months, which means that most people are not going to be there more than 6 months. And what happens in many nursing homes is the dentist goes there once a month. And if it takes 6 appointments to make a denture, it means that it's going to take 6 months for somebody to get a denture within a nursing home by a nursing home dentist. So they might get a denture, they might not get a denture, and whatever denture they get, it's usually the same denture that the only denture that they're going to get while on the nursing home. So we have to think about these two. So giving these patients or being able to serve more patients quicker or giving them dentures quicker might highly improve their quality of life, and maybe they can live a lot longer within the nursing home under these conditions. So time being a factor, we're going to take a look at 3 different things. We're going to see why it's profitable for dental clinics, why this is profitable for dental laboratories, and then why these could be profitable for dental clinics or DSOs that have an in-house lab, meaning they're going to manufacture the denture, but also they're going to see patients. So let's start with the simplest part, which is why is it profitable for dental clinics? And well, depending on what the patient's conditions and how familiar you are with the impression procedure, whether you're using the Dentca trays or whether you are using intraoral scanners, the whole process of getting a denture done conventionally requires initial impressions, custom tray impressions, recordings for CR and vertical dimension. And then you have to do a wax setup where you're going to check several things, and then you're going to do a final delivery to the patient. So all these visits take a lot of time. So on the conventional side, you're seeing that it takes about 6 to 8 hours to finish a regular denture. I'm talking about chairside time, not manufacture time, especially if you're making those wax rims, versus if you go the Dentca way of intraorally scanning or using the Dentca trays, where you're only taking about 60 minutes for the first visit. You could even jump and not do a try-in, or you can do the try-in and finish in 2 appointments and roughly about an hour to an hour and a half. The most would probably be 2 hours. So going a little bit more into detail, a lot of people, if we assume that a digital denture is going to cost somebody $300 an arch, many people tells me this, okay, so digital costs me $300 an arch. I can get the same denture done conventionally for $200 an arch. So if I'm using digital dentures, I'm actually losing money. And looking at the numbers and the math, it would seem that way. If you're charging about $1,000 for a denture, and the laboratory costs you $300 an arch, then your profit is $700 for CAD/CAM and $800 for conventional. But if we look at it closer, it's not exactly that way. And one of the things that I want to mention right now is that $100 difference that you're seeing at the moment with the benefits I'm going to mention later is not that much. So what I tell people is, okay, but how much is this really costing you? So we have to understand the difference between price and cost. So what are things costing you? How much effort, how much time you're putting into it? So first I asked them, how many hours does it take you to make a denture? And most people will say, well, it takes me about 6 to 7 hours. I need to do, diagnostic records, wax rims, final impressions, and do a face bow, or have another way of, making BD and CR measurements, maybe in other ways that you have that are a little quicker, but you have to mount it in the articulator, then you have to do a trying delivery, you have to do a final delivery. So that's usually how much it takes all across the board during different appointments. And then I asked a lot of people, what's your chair time? And you're not going to believe this, but a lot of people have no idea what I'm talking about when I talk about chair time cost. And for those who are not familiar with chair time cost, chair time is basically how much is it costing you to have a patient on the chair, regardless of the treatment that you're giving them. Each chair that you have in the office is costing you money, whether you have a patient on it or not. And basically what it means is that the chair time cost is calculated by dividing all your fixed monthly clinical expenses, such as your assistants and secretary salaries, how much you pay for rent if you're renting the clinic where you're operating, how much are your utilities, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have to divide that by the number of hours that you open every month, and then multiply that by the number of chairs, because it's not the same if you have one chair than if you have two, than if you have three, and it's not the same if you open Saturdays than you don't open Saturdays, et cetera, et cetera. So, these can range a lot depending on where you are. Of course, for example, things in California are a lot more expensive than they would be maybe in Iowa. So it ranges a lot. It can range from $20 an hour to $100 an hour. So there are some dentists in Beverly Hills that each chair is costing them $100 an hour, whether they're seeing a patient in there or not. So once you have obtained that, and let's go, for simplicity's sake and to give conventional dentures the maximum opportunity, let's say that you do a denture in the least amount of hours, which is 6 instead of 7, and that your chair time cost is the lowest possible, which is $20. Then I asked them, how much do you sell a denture for? So let's assume $1,000 an arch. Let's go with that for simplicity of math. So many people in conventional would say, okay, well, my actual profit is really what I charge minus the lab time, but also the materials that I use and also the chair time that I use. So in simple math, if you charge $1,000, then your chair time is $20 an hour times 6 hours that it takes you to make a denture, plus your lab cost, which is $200, plus maybe $20 in material between the gloves and the wax and the impression trays, et cetera, et cetera. So your profit with conventional is not really what the about $800 that we saw, or $700 that we saw, but it's actually $660. Now, if you do it with CAD/CAM, then it's a little bit more expensive. So it would be about $640. So many people say, well, I thought this lecture was going to be about how profitable CAD/CAM dentures are, but you're saying this is actually giving me a profit that is, $640. So there's really only $20. So they're making less money with CAD/CAM. Yeah, in a sense, it might seem so, but let's keep looking at it. Hold it just for one more moment. So we have to look at 3 different aspects before we move forward. And the first very important aspect is the point I wanted to make with all this explanation up until this point is that the cost of actually switching to digital versus conventional is not $100 difference, it's more about $20 difference. And then the second point that I really want to cover is the earning per hour, because this is where things really start falling into perspective. So let's say your hourly profit is basically whatever money you're making versus the number of hours it takes to deliver the final. So let's say your conventional profit, as we mentioned, is $660. That's how much money you're going to make for the entire denture, but it took you 6 hours to make it. So you're actually making $110 per hour of work. This is, again, very simple math. And with CAD/CAM, then you're making a profit of $640, but it only took you 2 hours to finish. So your profit per hour is $320 an hour. So see what I'm going to with this? So that's where the real earnings start to happen. And that's not all. Let's look at another third factor that I mentioned really is in there, which is the faster income turnaround. So what I'm saying is two things. So the first thing is it's going to take you about 6 appointments to get those $160 with conventional, but it's only going to take you 2 appointments, or more or less about a week and a half, to get those $640 with CAD/CAM. So you're getting your money earlier. But not only that, but we are actually getting you a lot more time. And that is about 4 extra hours with CAD/CAM. Remember, we finished a case in 2 hours instead of 6. So, you know, the part that nobody has analyzed up until this point in our conversation is this. You have extra hours where you can do another denture, 4 extra hours where you can do an implant, where you can do a veneer or a crown, where you can do an inlay, you can do fillings, you can do anything you want. You can do any treatment that you can think of that is going to generate the additional profit. Or you can go golfing. Nobody's judging, really. So in the same 6 hours, you can make $660 with conventional, or you can make 3 dentures that are going to net you each $640. That is going to be a total of $1,920. So now do you see what I mean? So your profit per hour is a lot different, and your chair type productivity is a lot different with digital than it would be with conventional. But up until this point, what I've said is how much you can save money by using the Dentca trace or by using an intraoral scanner. So many people tell me, well, that's really still not digital dentures, because, you know, I could use the trace and then finish this conventionally for a lab, or I can use an intraoral scanner and I'm still saving all that money. And that is true. But by using digital dentures, there's another factor that we have not analyzed. And it's this. So, but before I go that, let's speak about one more item, which is if you see the same 40 patients, let's say that you're seeing 1 patient a week. If you see the same 40 patients in the first week, but you only have to see the patient for 2 or 3 more weeks versus 6 more weeks, in 6 weeks, you can do twice as much. You can do 80 dentures with CAD/CAM, which means that in 6 weeks, you're making about $50,000 in profit. So do you see it now? Do you see how much money you can be making with this? And that's not all. So now let's go back to what the really important point about CAD/CAM dentures. So a conventional denture takes you 6 hours, and maybe you're making out about $110 an hour. And after those 6 hours, you made 1 denture. But with digital, since everything is designed digitally, in 2 hours, you already created records that you can then recreate to give the patient another denture. Maybe you want to deliver 2 dentures. Maybe you want to, you know, the denture gets lost or it gets broken and you need to create another one. You can give them however many dentures that you want. So let's say that you want to charge $2,000 and give the patient 2 dentures instead of 1. You spend the same amount of time, but you charge twice as much. So that is where the real earnings start to pile up, because you can add a lot of dentures in there with digital, where you cannot do that with conventional. Conventional means 1 set of impressions gives you 1 denture. With digital, you design it digitally so you can print however many as you need and then charge the patient the same amount of money. And let's say a denture is lost. With conventional, you have to start the process all over again. So you might charge the patient the same amount if they lost the denture, but you have to do the process all over again. So on that second denture, you're going to make $110 of profit again. But for that second lost denture, all you have to do is make 1 phone call either to Dentca or to your local lab that is doing digital dentures. They're going to send you a new denture, and you can charge the patient the same amount of money, but you didn't have to do anything. So it didn't cost you a single hour. Now, let's take a look at the other side of the cone. So how is this profitable for the laboratory? Or the question that's better known as, I already have, you know, insert whatever software name here. Why should I bother with Dentca Design if I have exocad, if I have 3 shapes, if I use Blue Sky Bio, etc. So designing with a license-based computer software might sound like a good idea, but is it really? I ask a lot of people these questions because a lot of people tell me, well, I already have exocad. Why should I switch to yours if I'm already paying a membership? And I say, well, You know, denture design with license-based modules, first of all, it's harder to use than our software. Whoever has tried Dentca Design will realize that utilizing our system is pretty simple. We're compared with exocad, where you need to have a technician that really knows their stuff, that knows how to set the teeth. You, in some softwares, you even have to set tooth by tooth, whereas you get an AI-generated setup with Dentca. So it gives it a lot more accuracy, and you don't need to get so technical. So that actually allows you to have more consistent results. We even did this experiment. We took an exocad case, and we had 5 different people designing the same case, and their dentures all look differently. Whereas those same 5 designers designed it with our software, and their final product was exactly the same. So that's where you get a little more predictability. Designing a denture case with conventional CAD software also requires a long time. So it takes about 2 to 3 hours on average to design a denture. And then while you're designing and while you're rendering that denture, you cannot use that exocad software for anything else. And then, you know, the cost of these design software licenses, they're expensive. If you go to some of these companies and ask them how much they charge, some of them might charge $8,000 just for the denture module. And one module means one computer with one technician, meaning that only one person can be designing at a time. So how many high-paid technicians and modules would it require to design 10, 20, 30 cases a day if you have a lot of these cases? So that is where these things really start coming into perspective. So Dentca has a web-based software where all you have to do is one computer with one internet connection, and you can start designing right away. So with conventional, if you're looking at 2 hours of a skilled technician, which is $25 an hour plus the cost of the module, making a denture is probably costing you just for the design about $70 an arch. With Dentca designing one denture, it's about $20. And not only that, but with the Dentca design software, it takes you about 10 minutes to design something, and then it takes about an hour to render. But while it's rendering on the back end on our servers, you can start another case. So you could be designing a case every 10 minutes versus one case every 2 to 3 hours. And then also you don't have to pay any license fees. So your overhead becomes a lot less. One last interesting thing is that our software will calculate minimal thickness automatically to ensure that whatever you print is going to be as safe as it can be when it comes to breakage. Of course, we always have patients who are proxists and they might break whatever you give them, even with a metal mesh. But when it comes to comparing apples to apples, the minimal thickness calculated by the software is going to ensure that no area is under what's recommended for the flexural strength of the dentures. And this is especially important with implant over dentures, where we create a space for the IOD, and then we bulk it up to ensure that it's properly reinforced. Whereas if you have a regular denture where you're drilling a hole, you're either going to end up with less thickness than what you want, and that thickness space is probably going to be filled up with acrylic that is auto-curable, and it's not the same quality as the regular acrylic. And the adoption is immediate. You don't need to get anything. If you have 10 computers already at your lab with 10 technicians, you can start right away. So as I mentioned before, rendering a denture with other software takes about an hour. And in that hour, if you need to do a quick crown or something else, you really can't do it. So what I'm trying to say here is we're not trying to take away your toy. If you want to keep exocad, keep your exocad. And then you can use Dentca Design to make all the dentures that you need, and you're freeing that exocad software to actually do all the crowns and bridges and everything else that you need to design. That way you can design both things at the same time. So we're not trying to compete or take something away, but we're trying to complement your design capabilities at the laboratory. So going direct to final allows for incredible profits with Dentca Design. So you're paying $20 for the design, roughly about $30 for the printable materials, plus whatever your overhead is. You know, many people calculate a specific overhead for about $50. So let's say for you know, simplicity's sake, you charge $300 an arch, your overhead can be $200 versus conventional, where I'm sure your overhead, your earning margin is a lot less than $200 per arch. And if you have a quick 3D printer and then you can print these a lot quicker, then you can do a lot more cases per day, which of course means a lot more money. And then for that, it's important that a mindset is a switch. For example, many people ask me, well, do I need to do a reline or a repair versus making a new one? So yeah, I mean, you can reline or you can repair a 3D printed denture, but if you're a laboratory, doing a rebase is probably going to cost you about $100, where if you're just reprinting the same denture, it's going to cost you about $50 or less. So why would you not do it this way? And then, of course, if you can go direct to final and then give that dentist the final denture, and then, if the denture is not perfect, they can use that final as a trying. But if it's perfect, the dentist delivered a final denture on the second appointment. So it's a win-win for both of you. And then, of course, as I mentioned, you can have duplicates done right away, and you don't need any special technicians to make the dentures as you would with conventional. So finally, let's talk about the profitability for dental clinics. So if you have a 3D printer and you're also seeing customers with digital dentures, then the profits can become even larger. So, you can take advantage of both worlds. You can either say it's too complicated and then Dentca can design for you, or you can even get involved in designing yourself and taking full control of everything. So with that saying, if you're looking at CAD/CAM, your actual profit is going to be price versus the lab cost and everything. So if you're actually manufacturing the dentures, then your lab cost is not $300 or $200. It's actually $100 because that's what your actual cost is. So if you're a DSO with a 3D printer, then you're making an even bigger profit than you would with conventional. And that translates that if you see the same 40 patients that we mentioned before, because you're seeing one patient an hour for 5 days a week, 8 hours per day, then those same 40 patients, you only have to see patients for less time. So that goes or translates that in 6 weeks you're doing 80 dentures, and now that your earnings are higher, then you're making 67,000 versus in 6 weeks versus the 50-something thousand that I mentioned before. So that means that you can make an extra $10,000 than if you're actually outsourcing your dentures to somebody else. So it makes a lot of sense that for you to print or for you to switch to digital dentistry. So it depends on what your needs are and if you're willing to invest in a 3D printer or not. And I'm not trying to take business away from laboratories. So if you're a DSO, you can make dentures and you can still send crown and bridges, or your dentures that require a mesh, or dentures that require a higher aesthetic margin to your laboratories, and then just do your conventional 3D printed dentures quickly in office right there and make a big profit out of that. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, you can always reach me at either my email address or my phone number, which is in there. I'm going to look at the chat to see if we have any questions. And I want to thank everybody for participating today. So it looks like there are no questions. So I'm going to give it about 1 more minute to see if there's any other questions, and then we're going to stop right there. Well, it seems that's about it. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you all being here, and I hope to see you soon in another one of our trainings. Thank you so much.